Hey, what's up, everybody? This is DJ Anthony. You were watching Wellness Week. Hey, why is it that nobody's getting married anymore? Let's get into it, okay? Let's peel it back. Let us unpack this stuff, okay? So, you know, you see it more and more nowadays, right? There's less and less people getting married. Now, that's not by chance. There's a reason for that. It's not bad luck, and it hasn't happened overnight. It's been happening over the decades. And I would make the argument it's really been turning up since 1970, where it's more and more single people staying single forever, not getting married, or not being married on paper. Maybe they live together, maybe they cohabitate, but they're not formally getting married. But I think there's even more of an uptick in people just not even living together, just straight up single. And they have relationships, they have their boyfriends, girlfriends, whatever, but they're just not living together. They're not doing common law marriage. They're not doing formal marriage. And there's a big reason for that. Now, for millennia, for millions of years, typically men and women would live together, more for a functionality. They would get married, but that was more for functionality. Like, hey, we got to hunt and gather. We have a farm. We need as many hands as possible. Typically, the woman stayed home and tended to the homestead, where the man went out and did whatever, the farming, the building, the hunting, blah, 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 blah. Well, in modern days, 2025 right now, that's not the case. And the big jump happened, I think, in 1970, we'll call it, late 60s. And again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just giving the observation here and the studies. So you have birth control. You have women's liberation, where they're able to go out and get educated. You have the internet. You have apps. You have AI. These are all things that have been happening since about 1970. And also benefit men too, benefit women, or you can make the argument they hurt both, whatever. It all depends on how you want to look at it. Again, I'm not making the judgment. I'm just saying this is why we have less and less formal marriage and more single people, because now for men and women, you can have the milk. You don't need the cow. My Aunt Lucy, she was married in the 60s and she had to stay in a really abusive, bad relationship because she was that woman of that time in history where you stayed home, no education, no recourse, no money, and you had to put up with a shitty husband. Well, if she was a teenager today or in her 20s today, she would have had a college degree because she was very smart, and she would have been able to leave a bad relationship. Well, back then she couldn't do that. So on paper, it looks like, oh, she stayed married her whole life. She did, but she really wasn't married her whole life. On paper she was, but it was just a horrible relationship. So there's a lot of good that can come out of liberation for men and women. Have to stay in something that's a horrible situation. So I think, yeah, with that, look today, right? Even to have a child, you don't need a man and you don't need a woman. You can have a child without, if you're a man or a woman, you can literally, if you have the money, hire someone for surrogacy and in vitro fertilization, somebody's egg and sperm, and you can have yourself a child. And that happens millions of times a year in all over the world. Okay. You have adoption, which has been around since forever. But my point is, now as a single person, you can adopt. I know people who are single people who can adopt. 30, 40, 50 years ago, you were not able to adopt if you were single. You had to be married. So laws, technologies, have changed. And now this is why you're seeing less and less people get married. Again, you're getting the milk. You don't need the cow for both men and women. You need something fixed in the house. You don't need a man. You don't need a woman. You can just get on an app, hit a button, boom, someone comes to your house and fixes it, whatever that is. You want to go on a date and have romance, boom, there's an app for that, literally, right? You need to go to the airport. You need to have a meal cooked for you. There's an app for that. You need to have your clothing washed. There's an app for that. You need to have your clothing ironed. App for that. Yeah, and I'm not joking. So, this is making the functionality of a marriage, of a union, less and less needed. So you have to ask yourself, if you're somebody in your 20s or 30s, why would I get married again? You have religion saying you have to get married, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. But the functionality of marriage, where the rubber meets the road, is no longer needed, period. So, it makes it harder and harder for people to really justify to themselves, why am I getting married again? You can love the person and have a union without being married. You don't even have to live together. I know people that have what they call lat marriages, living apart together. They have a great, famously, Oprah Winfrey, right? With Stedman Graham for forever. That's not because she's a billionaire. Many people who are middle class do that. And again, you don't need the person to be there every day with you. So you're seeing that. And this is why I think marriage is, people still do get married, but it's less and less probable in our society because men and women now have recourse. We don't need each other for most stuff anymore. So you can say it's a good thing. You can say it's a bad thing. depends. Again, I'm not giving the judgment. I'm just saying this is why. I mean, anything, right? I need my lawn mowed app for that. I need food app for that. I don't need a man or a woman. You don't just live life, and it's all AI. Literally a conversation. I'm not joking here. I'd rather talk to ChatGPT than 9 out of 10 of my friends. ChatGPT gives me a better conversation about anything, about sports, about life, about family, friends, whatever. I'll talk to ChatGPT before I'll talk to most of my friends. So if I have 100 friends, there's only 10 of them I would actually want to kind of like talk to. The other 90, I'd rather talk to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a much better conversationalist, gives me more insight. And that's today, while you're watching this in 2025. That's only going to become better or more magnified, however you want to call it. But, yeah, sure, there's downsides to a lot of this because now we see more and more people are lonely, right? Loneliness is a big, big epidemic. And this is because of technology, from, medicine like birth control, which is a technology, to apps, to AI, to the internet, to computers. These are all technologies, self-driving taxis. I don't need a taxi driver anymore. AI, robotics. I mean, so more and more every day. This is not something in the future. This is now. In the next couple of years, it will be just you'll be dealing with more and more and more with robots, apps, AI. And so this makes marriage less and less desirable. What am I getting for marriage? What's my ROI? Why would I get married again? Other than religion? I mean, and if you're religious, that's cool. God bless. But what? We don't need each other. And it's getting to the point where I'd rather be talking to AI. So, I mean, you want to have romance? You can have, people always say, well, what are you going to do when you're older? You want to be alone? I don't have to be alone. I have friends and family and AI, and I can conjure up a date within minutes with a dating app, and I can have romance for a day, a month, a year, a week. I can date somebody, and then, whatever. Doesn't work out, whoop-de-doo, boom, go back on the app. I mean, and I'm not being facetious. I mean, that's how we're living right now. And it's only going to get better or worse, however you want to look at it, but it will become more and more magnified. And this is why people aren't getting married. Aside from, you could say, well, that person doesn't have a job. I think it's more layered than that. I think it's more, I don't need the person. I just don't need the person. I can have, again, romance whenever I want. I can have food delivered to me whenever I want. I can have my clothing washed whenever I want. And it doesn't take $1 billion. You want to have a child. I mean, again, I have friends of mine that have used surrogates to have children. I have friends of mine that are single women who have used surrogates and have adopted, and they have a family, and they don't need a guy. And guys too. I know guys, again, have their families and have their lives, and they don't need a woman. And if you want to have a woman or a guy in your life for a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years, again, go on the dating apps, and if it doesn't work out, not a problem. You shed a few tears and, on to the next person. And that's a reality. And again, I'm not being sarcastic or facetious here, but this is why people aren't getting married. For better or for worse, for right or wrong, I'm just stating an observation. Tell me what you think. I'm out. Bye.